billed as quite often the only right-wing comedian in the country. Geoff Norcott joins me now. Hi, Geoff.
Yeah, I'm legally obliged to say I'm not the only one. There's three now. There's three, and we're an ever-growing cohort, and some that have, vaguely small c conservative sympathies.
I mean, that's the point, isn't it? You're not. It's not. You're not. You're not a Nazi, Geoff.
I'm not. Well, I mean, if you ask Twitter, I'm definitely nouveau fash, whatever that means. It sounds fashionable, so I'll take it. But yeah, I mean, the one thing that I find odd sometimes is that I'm represented. They'll say, "Oh, what you think is some sort of edgelord," when actually, even the name of my podcast, what most people think is, I sort of, the most arrogant thing I do is purport to be speaking for the majority. If you know what I mean, I think at the very most, I'm probably like a right-wing centrist dad.
And I suppose that's the point, isn't it? Is it if given the outcome of the last general election in 2019, you're not some wacko extremist, fringe element. That is essentially where most of the country is. You've got this great line about how voting Tories like buying a James Blunt album. Loads of people have done it, but weirdly, nobody ever sort of confesses to having done it.
Well, that was certainly true for a very long time. I think people are a lot more open about these things now because a lot of the binary lines of politics have been dissolved to a point by Brexit. And I think people on both sides of left and right have fallen out with their own to an extent. But as you rightly say, I mean, if you look at current polling for the Conservatives among the working class, I mean, it's sort of like the idea that it's this kind of niche thing is not borne out by polling. And also, historically as well, I'm probably, Matt, like, do you remember Mondeo Man?
Yeah.
Do you remember that phenomenon? I often think like I'm a sort of natural inheritor of the guy that moved a bit out of London because he wanted a slightly nicer house, bigger garden, and a decent motor. And there's a lot of people like that just want to improve their situation. And for some time now, for right or wrong, the Conservatives have been the brand that seemed the most secure bet in that respect.
And you've sort of told your life story in your book, Where Did I Go Right? Where you sort of addressed the fact that in many ways, if you were sort of ticking the stereotypes boxes of you grew up on a council estate, your dad was in a union, you should have been Labour through and through, and you'd have probably
both disabled here. I'm just getting these in because this all helps me get
good.
work.
I mean, it's a wonder you haven't been in a Labour Party, party political broadcast by now. So what do you think did happen? Is it you changed? Is politics changed? When we looked at class a couple of weeks ago on the show, and actually that switch of how Labour is now seen more as sort of metropolitan middle class, and the old Etonian leading the Tory party is somehow also the hero of the working class.
It is weird. We did find some strange alliances there where you sort of found yourself, particularly because of Brexit, agreeing with people and going, well, I agree with him. I wouldn't necessarily go for a beer with him. There wasn't much in common other than points of view. But I think that what the book sort of seeks to tell is how bit by bit you could form a sort of small c conservative mindset. And it's kind of like a worm's eye view of the big formative moments of my political life. I mean, for one, I went to the same school John Major went to, and you'll of course remember that famous slogan, what did the Tories do with a working class lad from Brixton? They made him Prime Minister. So one of the first things that I encountered was a real kind of contradiction of this received wisdom that it was all poshos and that they had no space for people like me. It might be that quite a lot of them don't want that much space for people like me, but there was quite a visible example there. And then it kind of goes through, that period in the mid-noughties that people often forget where council tax was going up exponentially, and I was a bit skint. And then the credit crunch came in. And one of the big things I think, Matt, that people forget is the expenses row and how it really upset the kind of Labour brand there was that I think of all of the people that went to prison for that or did time were Labour MPs. So bit by bit, throw in Iraq as well, Labour did slowly seem to unpick their brand during the noughties.
And on the subject of comedy and is it all left wing? And obviously you were the regular token Tory on the MASH report, which has since been axed by BBC Two. Is it a fair criticism about too much comedy is left wing? Is it just the nature of if we have a Tory government and you're going to punch up? There's more to go at with the actual government than the opposition. Is it a fair criticism or is it just a bit lazy?
Well, I think there's two things. One is like I think this punching thing gets a bit misrepresented. You know, like there are various kinds of establishments and power bases, and obviously the political power in Westminster is one of those. But there's also cultural power. I mean, the BBC themselves, a massive institution. There's a lot of satirical targets. I do think the idea that the country is sitting there going, we need more right-wing comedy. I don't think that they're thinking that. I don't think anyone has ever thought that. But what they do think is maybe it'd be nice on a panel show once in a while if viewpoints were a bit more diverse. Like for example, if you think about your average topical panel show, you probably couldn't imagine them going at, like criticizing Meghan Markle or certain, subjects that are a bit not taboo as such, but you kind of can guess where the direction of travel is coming from. And, like you would never expect to hear someone that would even vaguely make a defense of Winston Churchill's legacy. And I realize now I'm going to get quoted by, sorry, is this right-wing comedy making jokes in support of Winston Churchill? It's absolutely not. And the truth is no one has ever made a joke about something they support, right? It's impossible to do. Comedy is all about the things that confuse you. And just a final point, I think that argument about, punching up, if we do eventually get a Labour government, there's no evidence that that's going to happen. But are you telling me that then left-wing comedians won't have a place at the table then? If they want to talk themselves out of work come that point, I'm happy to go along with it.
Well, they just find fault for it. I mean, you're right that does seem a bit of a little way off. Yeah. Do you think that actually it would be better if sometimes the focus was on the joke and not the politics? That actually, when I've not anyway on your scale, but a couple of years ago when I did a small stand-up tour, I mean, I don't think anyone could have come away with any idea of how I voted, because it was all about the joke and not about sort of. I mean, it's a ridiculous idea to think that an art centre in a market town somewhere, you've got to completely change how somebody's votes. They've come for a night out, not a lecture.
Come on, Matt. You mean that people don't come to the Corn Exchange in Ipswich to walk out with a completely new political mindset? You're joking. I mean, yeah, I totally agree, and I think that maybe Brexit made us all a bit more tribal than we would have been otherwise. And the process of the pandemic, there's a joke that I was doing recently was about, a lot of my lefty friends say, do you regret voting for a Conservative government? I'm like, well, I regret not getting one. The idea that there aren't Conservatives around that have plenty of criticisms of the government as they've been. And I've certainly found myself that I'll always have my bias, you know what I mean? That will always come out bit by bit, but I've certainly been, if I think of a good joke about the Conservatives, it's the joke that should absolutely lead what you're doing, not a desire to reinforce some sort of worldview.
Absolutely. And that's basically my approach whenever I write my column in the Times as well. But I have basically no principles at all. It's all about the gag. Now, Geoff, we should mention, so your book's out now, isn't it? Where Did I Go Right?
No, it's available for pre-order now, and it comes out on the 13th of May. Where Did I Go Right? How the Left Lost Me. I think that's what the left call victim blaming, but I've gone with it as a title anyway. And and there's an online event as well on the 11th of May through Fame that I'm doing, where Ramesh Ranganathan is going to be interviewing me. If you go to my Twitter and stuff, you'll be able to see details of that event too.
Perfect. So you can get you in video form, audio.
Well, he's going to interview me, and I think you can get a book. And we're just without the live stuff, Matt. We're having to cover all these other new angles that nobody knew existed before.
To get back to some live stuff now, Geoff. That's the book plug done. But don't go anywhere, because you've promised to do this. Yes, it's time for our hugely popular quiz. Can you get to number 10? 10 questions, each loosely connect to 10 cabinet jobs. The more questions you get right, the better the job you get, taking your place alongside our listeners and guests. If you make it all the way to number 10 and get that right, you'll cross the threshold to become our show's Prime Minister. This is how the cabinet currently looks. Daffyd Jones is Minister without portfolio. Chris Key is Culture Secretary. Roger Cork, one of the twins, is Environment Secretary. Gail Porter is Transport Secretary. Adam Newman is Education Secretary. Harriet Minter is Health Secretary. Home Secretary is Fiona Nolan. Francisca da Costa is Foreign Secretary. Matthew Robertson is Chancellor. And Howell Davis is the Solicitor from Wales, is our show's Prime Minister. So, Geoff Norcott, have you got any political aspirations, any cabinet job you think you'd be quite good at?
Well, the Tory party, I won't lie, they have tried to tap me up a couple of times. I don't know, the way that they recruit spies. I have had a bit of that, but my God, the idea that I could lose my job because someone got their toe sucked or something, that is not the kind of job I want to do.
Have they genuinely actually tried to tap you up, the Tories?
There were a couple of conversations, I think, as the idea that there might be another election coming into view sooner than they thought, and they might need a couple more candidates. But yeah, look, it's a great thing to be able to wang on about politics without having any responsibility.
Oh, 100%.
Both know, Matt.
100%. Okay, then let's do this. Let's play Can You Get to Number 10? Question number 1, Geoff Norcott, to become Minister without portfolio, complete this well-known saying, actions speak louder than... I nearly said it myself then. I nearly just gave the answer. Very good. Words is the right answer. Question 2, to become Culture Secretary. Which famous graffiti artist comes from Bristol?
Banksy
Is the correct answer. Question 3, to become...
Well, he says he does, so do you know what I mean? How do we know?
We just don't know.
All the big lefties come from Bristol these days. We all know.
It's where it's all going on. Question 3 for Environment Secretary. What's the chemical symbol for lead? Is it PB, PC or PD?
PB.
PB is the correct answer. Question 4, to become a Transport Secretary. Shanghai is the main airport for which Asian city-state?
Wuhan.
No.
Wuhan?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Correct. The answer we're looking for was Singapore. Singapore was the answer. But you've become Environment Secretary, which isn't too bad. You get your wellies on.
Yeah.
Out goes, you bump off. We did have 2 twins in the cabinet. They've both gone now. Roger Court goes out, and in comes Geoff Norcott. Geoff, thanks so much for joining us. Best of luck with the book, and I look forward to you being out and about doing things live and not on blooming Zoom.
I very much hope so. Cheers, Matt.
Speak to you soon. Cheers. Geoff Norcott there joining us on Times Radio.